On today's Locked On Giants podcast, we check in with Locked On Ole Miss host Stephen Willis about the Mississippi Rebel draft prospects. That's coming your way next here on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of Locked On Giants is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when their first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com today to get started. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credentialed member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all of my written work. And as always, welcome on into my Blue Crew community members, my everydayers, my newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And on today's show, we're going back and taking a look at some more college prospects from the various schools. And I'm pleased to welcome in my Locked On Ole Miss colleague, Stephen Willis. He is the host. Does a great job covering Ole Miss. So he's going to tell us a little bit about Jaxson Dart, Walter Nolan, and some of the others in the draft class that maybe we want to pay attention to here in the land of the Giants. Stephen, welcome on in, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me. I mean, with Charlie Connerly being a former Giant and Eli Manning being a former Giant, it just seems naturally that when Jaxson Dart's available, you'd want to talk about it.
Absolutely. And I don't know if the Giants are going to get him, but you know what? We've got to talk about him. You cover Ole Miss every day, not just football, baseball, all the sports. He does a great job covering all the sports. But, Stephen, let's start with Jaxson Dart. He's a guy whose draft stock has been rising. What can you tell us about him? Give us an overview based on everything you've seen from him over the last few years. Where's his strengths, his weakness, and what type of system do you think he best fits into?
System-wise, I'm not 100% sure because my only frame of reference is the Lane Kiffin system, which traditionally is not a great system to develop quarterbacks into the NFL. I mean, that's just the reputation that's been deserved. But this season was a little bit different because he had Joe Judge as an analyst on staff for the course of the whole year, which means there were some NFL principles that were probably taught to him that maybe Matt Corral did not get. So I think we need to go into the situation saying that, hey, this could be a little bit different. We understand the reputation as before, but Jaxson Dart is not Matt Corral. And I think it's important that for some reason, if he falls to number 34 and ends up with the New York Giants fans need to realize he's not Eli Manning either. He's a different quarterback, but Jaxson Dart might be the best quarterback in the entire country as far as this year. I would take him over Cam Ward. I would take him over Shedeur Sanders, my opinion only. But what Jaxson Dart does really well is he is completely all in, an absolutely all in guy that is going to bury himself into the knowledge. He's very Peyton Manning like as a quarterback going into through college and into the NFL. I expect him to be all in. He was a 10 of 10 leader for Ole Miss. He would essentially built the roster that is getting drafted. All of those players, Jaxson Dart, both offensively and defensively, held a major part in recruiting all of them. Jaxson Dart throws one of the best deep balls in college football, if not the best. And he showed the adaptability. He threw a lot of 50-50 balls when Trey Harris was healthy because Trey Harris would win most of those because he's a contested catch monster. But after Trey Harris got injured, you saw with Jordan Watkins, a little bit smaller wide receiver, him adjust to throwing a little bit deeper, hitting the wide receiver in stride. Down the field is very good for him. In the 2022 year, the big problem for Jaxson Dart was that middle zone right around the linebackers. A lot of people thought he had linebacker blindness, and everybody was worried about that going into 2023. that was completely fixed. If there's a problem with Jaxson Dart, it's not going to be a problem for long. Like I said, I think he's one of the better quarterbacks, if not the best quarterback in all of college football. Throws a beautiful deep ball as well. Now, problematically, I think he can use the deep ball as a crutch a little bit. And at times, as I like to say, Ole Miss turned into the 1970s Oakland Raiders with their deep balls downfield. And that was because Jaxson Dart was very much in that. And I think mechanically, he can get a little bit off kilter at time to time. And I think Patrick Mahomes being a major player in the NFL has ruined playing quarterback for normal people. And I think there's a tendency to try and throw the ball off platform as well.
Stephen, you mentioned Lane Kiffin's system. Mm-hmm. And I've read that it's primarily a one-read system, and that, once the one read is taken away from Jaxson Dart, maybe there's some problems there. I mean, have you observed that? And do you anticipate that maybe being a stumbling block to Jaxson Dart being pro-ready in his first year?
Maybe. Ole Miss runs a predominantly RPO system. It's that old Baylor system, essentially, with RG3 from the mid 2015, 2016, that time frame. And Matt Corral fell into the trap to being a completely one-read quarterback. And he had trouble in the NFL, and that's the reason he is playing with the Birmingham Stallions right now. Jaxson Dart doesn't necessarily have that, because they still have the one read that they go through in their offense. But like I mentioned before, Joe Judge being a part of the staff, Jaxson Dart did a decent job of hitting his checkdowns over the course of the season. You don't throw for 4,200 yards unless you can hit your checkdowns at any level. So we'll see exactly how that goes and how it translates to the NFL. But Jaxson Dart this year showed a more advanced level than Matt Corral did 3 years ago.
Where does Jaxson Dart maybe need to smooth out some of the rough edges in his game in terms of technique, or just to make sure that, when he does make that transition to the NFL level, that it's going to be as smooth as possible?
I think it's in the mid-range. You want to see Jaxson Dart in the passes from 10 to 20 yards when the windows in the NFL are increasingly just narrow. He does a good job with that. His ball placement is just elite. You would notice that if he gets drafted by your team. His ball placement is pretty much second to none in college football. But his ability to get off platform, his ability for his mechanics to break down from time to time, that can cause some accuracy issues. And if that happens in the NFL, it's going to be going the other way. So I think that's the biggest thing he's going to need to work on at the next level.
Objectively speaking, where do you see Jaxson Dart being drafted?
I think somewhere between, I think it's 9, the New Orleans Saints, and 22, the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think he probably ends up somewhere around there. That is, unless the Giants decide to try and grab him at 3. But hey, to each their own, right? But I think that there's been a lot of traction recently with the New Orleans Saints, because everybody knows that, Kellen Moore wants a different quarterback than they have had recently. And the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think, have talked to him several times. They're in the Aaron Rodgers sweepstakes. So I don't know if that would be a good position for Jaxson Dart to learn with. Not exactly a Kurt Warner to Eli type situation there. But I think that might possibly be the plan. And honestly, if we're just going to be real about it, objectively speaking, the Pittsburgh Steelers would be a dream landing spot for Jaxson Dart.
Stephen, do you get the impression with quarterbacks that have followed Eli Manning that maybe some people are expecting those quarterbacks to be Eli Manning?
Well, early on, but honestly, when it comes to Ole Miss and Eli Manning, the quarterbacks that immediately followed Eli, there was like just a desert of big name quarterbacks for 5 years afterwards. So the next Eli never really became a thing. Now, Ole Miss's quarterback room over the last 10 years or so, to where they had Bo Wallace and then Chad Kelly and then Jordan Ta'amu and then Matt Corral and then Jaxson Dart. Now, that's a different animal now. If Eli was at the beginning of that, yeah, you probably would see a little bit that. But Ole Miss struggled so much in the immediate aftermath of Eli Manning at the quarterback position. I don't know if there was too much pressure on any Ole Miss quarterback to live up to Eli's standard, because he's the best quarterback that played at Ole Miss ever. And I think that 90% of all Ole Miss fans would tell you that.
Hey, Giant fans, ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. So go on and take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use promo code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com to get 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, and that promo code is LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. All right, we're talking with Stephen Willis. He is the host of Locked On Ole Miss, and he is telling us everything we need to know about the Ole Miss draft class. And now, let's talk about some other prospects. I want to talk specifically about Walter Nolan, defensive tackle, and Princely Umanmielen.
Pretty good. Pretty good.
I got it.
Mm-hmm.
I believe he's a defensive end. Am I right?
Yes. He is defensive end.
Defensive lineman, because the Giants need defensive linemen. Let's start off with Nolan, and just give me a scouting report, if you will, where he fits, what's his best position, and is he more of a run stopper, a pass rusher, or a combination of both?
Well, Walter Nolan, if you told me there was one player from Ole Miss's draft class that became a superstar in the NFL, I would put my money on Walter Nolan being that guy. Walter Nolan has elite ability. He's one of the strongest players that I can think of. You can see his weight at 300 pounds, and that might make you a little bit nervous, but his strength kind of more than makes up for it. There seemingly was one play every single game where he just thored an offensive lineman over the course of the season and pushed him around with one arm. Very Reggie Whiting the defense, if we're going to be honest about it. He's not the big guy, not the run stuffer, so he's going to have to use his strength to hold up whenever other teams are running power plays and things like that. But his feet are elite. He is an excellent pass rusher. He's somebody that's going to be able to get after the quarterback while it's going on. And Walter Nolan, if you can scheme to it, if your defensive coordinator knows what you have on the defensive line, I think Walter Nolan could be a guy that can really help you out for several years to come.
Is he more of a 3-tech, a 1-tech, a 0?
He's a 3-tech. He is absolutely a 3-tech. He could probably play some 5-eye as well, on an odd front on the defensive line. So 3 technique, outside 3-4 defensive end. I think that's the sweet spot for a Walter Nolan, because his feet can able to handle it. Now, 1 technique or a 0 technique, head up nose guard, I don't know if he has enough girth for that to happen. I think he would get kind of pushed off with a center and a guard being constantly double teamed, and I think that could be problematic for him.
And how is he, how's his run defense, his pass rush? I mean, where does he stack up there?
His pass rush is really good. He played in the backfield quite a bit over the course of the season. Now, part of that had to do with Ole Miss's defensive line was absolutely sick. All 4 of them are probably going to get drafted in the NFL draft, between Walter Nolan, J.J. Pegues, Jared Ivey, and then Princely Umanmielen. And they're all probably going to get drafted. So it isn't a situation where the other team could pick on him, if that makes sense. It wasn't where he was okay, we need to make sure he gets blocked first, because Ole Miss had so many weapons across their front. So I'm not exactly sure if he would go to a team that didn't have a very good run defense to where the other team could game plan to him. I don't know if he could be game planned out, is my point. But if he went to a place that had another veteran, good defensive lineman to where you could force, if they forced another double team, they're not going to be able to do it because of their ends and getting a quarter of the quarterback. I think he would be very good and thrive in that situation in the young years. And then whenever he hits that second contract, really take off. If that makes sense.
Okay, now let's talk about Princely Umanmielen. Hope I
Yeah.
said that right. That's going to take some getting used to if he
Yeah.
gets drafted here. All right, same question basically for you. What does he do well? Where's his best position?
He is a defensive end. He played the jack position at Ole Miss, which is basically a combo defensive end / linebacker. And pass rushing is his game. He can get after the quarterback. I think he sacked Carson Beck and Georgia 2 or 3 times in their ball game. And run defense, I don't know too much. I think he's going to be able to do it because he's that good of an athlete. But he is that guy that is going to be a pass rushing specialist as soon as he steps on, I would almost said campus, but on a practice field somewhere, learning how to do that. We'll have to see if he gets something to go with his speed rush and his bend around the end, because nobody in college football could really deal with that. Yesterday, I was on the Big Blue Kickoff Live, and they said, "Hey, what's his secondary move? Does he have a bull rush or something like that?" And I'm not 100% sure, but he does need to find a changeup to go with that fastball if we're going to be real about it. If he can do that, he's somebody that can be effective at the NFL level. If not, he is basically a special teams demon and a pass rushing specialist waiting to happen.
Those are just two of the defensive linemen that I think are in the draft for the Rebels. I mean, let's talk about the other guys and what they bring to the table.
JJ Pegues, he is the guy that played the 0-1 tech nose guard position in Ole Miss's defense last year. He was basically the mayor of Oxford. He got some signs, some run over the course of the season as a short yardage running back. He is an extremely athletic player, and he is basically has a personality that will light up. He was one of the fan favorites in Oxford, Mississippi. I don't know how it will translate to the NFL level. I have a hard time getting a read on him, but he does have the athleticism to do it. And he's 320, 330 pounds. He's big enough to handle it as well. So we'll see, because he has a lot of the tools to be successful, but he hasn't played defensive line very long. I think he's about 3 years in at this point. He was basically won a state championship in high school as a Wildcat quarterback. And then he went to Auburn as a tight end. And when he transferred to Ole Miss, he transferred as a defensive tackle. Now, Jared Ivey, love Jared Ivey. Jared Ivey is one of my favorite players on this whole Ole Miss class right now to cover it my whole time that he was there. He's pretty amazing. He's so cerebral and all of that, playing a strong side, run stopping defensive end. He is a player that, in my opinion, has a chance to where you look up, and he's just been in the NFL for 7 years, and he doesn't really do anything, or he's not a superstar, but he's just always around. He's such a good player. He comes from excellent stock. His family is amazing. Love Jared Ivey, and he's another person that you'd just be glad to have associated with your organization.
When you look at these guys and where they might go in the draft, because I'm just trying to get an idea of if the Giants have a chance of getting of any of these guys, where do you think they might land? What are you hearing with regards to where they might land in the draft?
I think Walter Nolan, Cincinnati is really interested in Walter Nolan. Talking with people around it, I think Jaxson Dart, it's going to be hard for him to fall to 34. You're probably going to have to reach a little bit for him because, like I said, I think somewhere between 9 and 21 or 22 is where he's going to go. And I think the Rams are really fascinated with him as well. Trey Harris would be an interesting wide receiver for the Giants with Malik Neighbors already up there. And if you don't get a quarterback, you can at least stockpile him for next year when there's going to be some more quarterbacks that hit the system as well. Trey Harris, not going to test well at 4.3, 4.4, But what he is a contested catch monster. If it's a 50-50 ball, it's actually a 75-25 ball that he's likely going to win, and his catch radius is absolutely nuts. The problem with him is he's had trouble staying healthy over the last couple of years. So obviously is buyer beware there. So it may be a third, fourth, fifth round type pick. But wide receivers at Ole Miss, they have pretty much a history lately of being pretty good. The other one is Chris Paul, linebacker. He's somebody that if you have a defensive line in front that can keep offensive line off of him, he has the range to go sideline to sideline, in my opinion, even at the next level. And he's somebody that loves contact. And because of that, I think that he is somebody that at least will end up being a captain on the special teams, and he's around the league for a very long time.
Hey, Giant fans, the NBA playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. From three-pointers to steals to assists, FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live props bets into same-game parlay for a chance to win big. So don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com today and claim your $250 in bonus bets. All right, Giant fans, we're talking with Stephen Willis. He is the host of Locked On Ole Miss. And Stephen, the Rebels have, I want to say, over a dozen guys in this draft class, including the ones we've already talked about. But let's talk about the ones that people really aren't talking about that you think might jump up and surprise a few people once they hit the NFL level.
I like Trey Amos, the cornerback. A cornerback that originally started out in Louisiana Lafayette and transferred to Alabama. If you transfer to Nick Saban with his love of defensive backs, you know that guy can play football. After Saban retired, he transferred out to Ole Miss to Pete Golding and was just very good. The last half of the year, they just didn't even attempt to throw the ball in his general directions. He completely shut that off and just went after the other cornerback. I like Trey Amos. I've seen some draft grades from him somewhere around the early second round, that period. But he's somebody that I think could be very good as well. And we'll see how it goes. I mean, Jordan Watkins, I love. He's one of my favorite players, but he's so slight. And wide receivers in the NFL being that slight, set the single game receiving mark against Arkansas, the single game touchdown mark against Arkansas. He caught that freakish pass in the Gator Bowl to where Jaxson Dart was doing that routes on air thing where he just runs left and throws it up and hit the guy dead in stride, and he caught the ball. I like Jordan Watkins, and I want him to get a shot, a real shot, and if he can do that, I'd like to see him stick. And then Juice Wells, if he can hold on to the football, he has all of the other ability.
Ole Miss recently had its pro day, I think a few weeks ago, I think it was. At the pro day, did anybody help their draft stock, in your opinion, that, maybe people weren't talking about, but now because they performed so well, they helped themselves? Or do you just think, the pro day was at a point where, it was just like the icing on the cake and what was done is done?
It was the icing on the cake. I think the player that helped himself most was probably Jaxson Dart. And that is because that whenever he talks to GM, whenever he talks to head coach, whenever he has an interview, whenever he sits on the chalkboard drawing stuff up, it's just A+. He nails it every single time. And whenever, I guess the Senior Bowl is where he started really rising up. And everybody's like, oh, he might be a second or third rounder. And it's like, whoa, he's going to be a first rounder. And we don't know exactly where it's going to stop. I don't think it's going to stop at 3, but I think he has a chance, being a quarterback in a less than superior draft class, to move up pretty good over the next couple of weeks.
Based on what you heard or observed from the pro day, did you happen to catch wind of any extra attention maybe Giants personnel were paying to any of the Ole Miss prospects?
No, that's something I wouldn't be knowledgeable about. It's whenever it came to that, I was the video coordinator probably 20 years ago at Ole Miss. And part of that job was dealing with the people wanting video from that was the class that Patrick Willis came out. And so whenever that was going through, you're paying a real close attention to NFL teams that are there. The NFL teams that are available, I'm more analytically driven with that, and that they just perform well, because we all know that the draft is kind of a scattershoot anyway.
Yeah, for sure. And then final question for you, if you had to pick one guy from the Ole Miss class that has Giant written all over him, regardless of the round, who would you pick and why?
Well, I would take, and let's see, what pick is that? 34 is the Giants' second round pick.
Mhm.
I would take Trey Amos. I think
Okay.
he would lock down cornerback, get your defense good to go. The Giants are built traditionally on defense whenever they are at their best. Defense is a main thing. And whenever they're really good, they have a corner sitting outside that can handle everything. He's 6'2", he can run, and he will absolutely lock you down. I like Trey Amos.
Is he press man or more of a zone guy?
He's press man.
Okay. Can he
He's
play zone?
Yes, because they did mix it up from time to time last year. But he also played. Ole Miss played a field and boundary cornerback. He mainly played on the boundary, so he was the very rough and tumble guy. And that defensive line was so good, the quarterback didn't have very long to wait for that window to open up, and it took a little while for that window to open up for Trey Amos. So yeah, I like Trey Amos.
All right. Well, I'd be surprised if one of the Rebels don't land up with the Giants. I mean, I think not just because they have so many guys that are entering the draft here, but you would think that there's a position, given the way the Giants have set up their draft, you would think that there's going to be at least one, whether it's a draft pick or they bring them in as an undrafted free agent. So I'd be surprised if a Rebel doesn't land up in New York. I mean, do you agree?
Oh, I would love that to happen, because there's honestly a weird relationship between Ole Miss and the New York Giants because of Charlie Connerly, because of Eli Manning, because of those players. There's generations of Ole Miss fans that are New York Giants fans because of that group. And I think it's probably not going to happen, but it would honestly be really, really cool if Jaxson Dart ended up there. That would be fun.
Yeah, I don't know if they're going to get him though, given where they're
Yeah.
drafting and what everything's being reported. And I don't think he gets past, like you said, the Steelers, who I
Mhm.
believe have probably a lot of interest in him. I know they brought him in for a visit. I don't know if New Orleans brought him in for a visit, but I know the Steelers did. So I don't know if he makes it down to the Giants. But look, anything can happen. That's why we
Mhm.
cover all our bases here and we talk about as many prospects as we can. So Stephen, I want to thank you for taking the time to come on the Locked On Giants podcast with me to tell everybody about the Ole Miss draft class. And Giant fans, I want to thank you for tuning in. As always, be sure to check out Steven's program, Locked On Ole Miss, as well as all of our college hosts. They cover football, baseball, all the sports, the transfer portal, NIL, all that stuff. I don't know how they do it. I mean, I'm just absolutely amazed at the amount of work you guys put in, as opposed to us. We just cover one team, so it kind of makes it easier. So Giant fans, do check them out. For Stephen Willis, I'm Patricia Traina. Giant fans, keep it here all week long. We've got Joe Shanes coming up on Thursday. He's going to speak to the media. We've got more programming for you as we get you ready for the 2025 NFL Draft. Have a good one, everybody.